The evening sky was turning soft shades of orange and pink when Emily drove down the quiet highway that cut through the small town. She had been on the road for hours, trying to keep herself busy and distracted from the heavy thoughts that kept following her. It had been one of the hardest weeks of her life, and although she didn't want to admit it, her heart felt tired. She needed a place to rest, even if just for a little while before the weight inside her grew too heavy to carry. As she passed a sign for a small roadside cafe, she decided to stop. She didn't know the town, and she didn't know anyone in it, but she hoped the warm lights and the smell of fresh food might give her a small moment of peace. The place wasn't crowded. Only a few locals sat inside, talking quietly. The sound of soft country music filled the air, making the place feel calm and almost comforting. Emily walked in slowly, trying not to show how drained she felt. She chose a small table in the corner where no one could see her face clearly. She didn't want attention. All she wanted was a quiet space to sit, breathe, and maybe gather her emotions before they fell apart. She ordered a warm drink, hoping it would calm the tightness in her chest. But even before the drink arrived, she felt her eyes sting. She blinked quickly and told herself not to cry. Not here, not in front of strangers. She took a deep breath and looked out the window at the fading sky, trying to focus on anything except the storm of emotions inside her. Just then, the door of the cafe opened again. A tall man walked in, brushing dust off his boots. He wore a simple shirt, a worn-out hat pushed slightly back, and he carried himself with the gentle confidence of someone who spent most of his days working outdoors. His name was Daniel, though Emily had no idea who he was yet. To her, he was just another stranger entering the place. But Daniel was not a stranger to the people inside. The owner greeted him with a friendly nod, and a couple of regular customers waved. Daniel smiled warmly, as he always did. He had a calm presence, the kind that made others feel comfortable around him without him trying too hard. He noticed Emily almost immediately, not because she was loud or drawing attention, but because she was trying so hard not to draw attention at all. Her body language, the way she kept her head down, the way she wiped the corner of her eyes when she thought no one was watching, Daniel noticed these things. He had a habit of noticing when people were hurting. Maybe it came from years of helping others on the ranch, or maybe from growing up in a small community where everyone cared about each other. Whatever the reason, he could sense that she needed a little kindness. Still, he didn't want to intrude. He ordered his drink and sat at a nearby table. He glanced her way once, just to make sure she was okay. When she lifted her head slightly, their eyes met. Emily quickly looked away, embarrassed. She didn't want anyone to see her like this. She felt exposed, even though she wasn't doing anything but sitting quietly. She simply carried too much pain, and it felt as if her sadness was written across her face for the world to read. Daniel didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so he waited a few minutes before gently approaching her table. He walked slowly, giving her time to notice him before he spoke. When he reached her, he stopped a respectful distance away. "Excuse me," he said in a calm, friendly tone. "Is everything all right? You look like you might need a little company." Emily looked up, surprised. Her first instinct was to say she was fine. That was the line she said to everyone, even when she was breaking on the inside. But something about Daniel's voice made her pause. It was steady, gentle, not pushy at all. His eyes were kind, the kind of eyes that made her feel like it was safe to be honest. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She simply shook her head slightly, unable to pretend anymore. Daniel nodded softly, understanding more from her silence than she expected. "Would it be okay if I sit here? If not, I can leave you alone. I just didn't want you feeling isolated." Emily hesitated. She didn't know him. She didn't know anything about him. But at the same time, she felt too lost to push away someone offering genuine kindness. She finally whispered, "You can sit." Daniel pulled out the chair gently and sat across from her. He didn't stare, and he didn't ask questions right away. Instead, he let a quiet moment settle between them, giving her room to breathe. The cafe around them continued with its soft hum, but somehow the space between them felt calmer. "I'm Daniel," he said after a moment, keeping his voice light. "Emily," she replied, her voice still soft. "It's nice to meet you, Emily," he said with a small smile. "I didn't mean to disturb your evening. You just looked like you could use someone nearby." Emily looked down at her hands. "I've just had a long week," she said, hoping that simple explanation was enough. Daniel accepted it without pushing for more. Long weeks can feel even longer when you're dealing with them alone. She glanced up at him, surprised at how accurately he understood what she wasn't saying. There was no judgment in his tone, no pity, just quiet understanding. They sat there, and slowly, Emily felt her breathing settle. Daniel began talking about simple things: his ranch work, how the cafe served the best warm drinks in the area, how he always came here after a tiring day. His stories were light and calm, and Emily found herself listening without effort. His presence helped soften the tightness in her chest. Eventually, she relaxed enough to share a little bit about herself. Not everything, just small details. Where she was traveling from, why she was on the road, how she needed some quiet time away from everything familiar. She kept it vague, but even those small truths made her feel lighter. Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't press for more. He simply listened, nodding gently, letting her speak at her own pace. The sun outside was nearly gone now, leaving the cafe bathed in warm lights that made everything look softer. Emily felt herself growing calmer, almost as if the quiet of the evening and Daniel's comforting presence were slowly helping her breathe again. For the first time in days, she didn't feel completely alone. And she didn't know it yet, but this simple moment, this quiet meeting at a small cafe, was the beginning of something that would shift her entire journey. She had walked in hoping for a little peace, and instead, she had found someone whose kindness felt like a warm hand catching her just before she fell apart. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just real, simple human connection. And sometimes, that's exactly what saves a person. The warm lights of the cafe continued to glow softly around them, making the place feel like a small bubble of calm in the middle of a world that had been too loud and too heavy for Emily. She sat quietly for a moment, holding her warm drink between her hands. The warmth felt comforting, almost like an anchor to keep her steady. Daniel sat across from her, gentle and patient, giving her the space to gather her thoughts instead of rushing her. Outside, the sun had finally disappeared, leaving the sky a deep blue. A few clouds drifted across it, hinting that the weather might change soon. Emily noticed the way the wind moved the trees outside the window, their shadows shaking softly. Everything felt slow and peaceful inside the cafe, but she could feel something shifting inside herself. Having someone sit with her, someone who didn't expect anything from her, gave her a small sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. Daniel took a sip of his drink and rested his hands on the table, relaxed and calm. He wasn't studying her, wasn't trying to figure her out, and that helped Emily breathe a little deeper. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes even when we don't say much, it helps just to have someone nearby." Emily nodded. "I guess so." Her voice was quiet, but not as shaky as before. Daniel smiled gently. "I've seen a lot of people come through this little town. Travelers stop here for all sorts of reasons. Some are on vacations, some are running toward something, and some—" He paused, choosing his words kindly. "Are trying to make sense of things." Emily lowered her eyes. His words touched something real inside her, though he didn't know her story. She took a deep breath. I didn't plan to stop here, I just needed a break. Everything felt too heavy. Daniel nodded with quiet understanding. Life can get heavy. And sometimes it gets heavy faster than we can prepare for. Those simple words made her chest tighten again. Not painfully, but in a way that felt honest. She wrapped both hands around her cup, holding on to the warmth. You ever feel like your thoughts are too loud? She asked quietly, almost whispering the question. All the time, Daniel answered, surprising her. People think working on a ranch means life is simple, but the mind doesn't care where you are. It can make noise anywhere. Emily looked up at him, and for the first time that evening, a tiny, fragile smile lifted the corner of her lips. Daniel continued. That's why I come here most evenings. Something about this place helps me slow down. She glanced around, the soft lighting, the simple wooden tables, the gentle music, the quiet conversations. It made sense. She wanted to tell him more about why she was struggling, what she had been carrying, but the words were still stuck inside her. She wasn't ready to open everything, but she felt safe enough to say something small. It's been a really emotional week, she said softly. I felt like I was losing control of everything. Daniel didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need details to understand her feelings. I'm sorry you had to carry all of that alone, he said, in a calm voice. His kindness made her throat sting again. She blinked fast to stop any tears from forming. She didn't want to cry in public. Daniel noticed the way she swallowed hard and looked away, so he leaned back a little, giving her space but staying present. You don't have to explain anything you don't want to. It's enough that you're here and trying to breathe. Emily took a slow breath, steadying herself. She looked at his steady expression and realized that he wasn't asking anything from her. He wasn't trying to solve her life or push her to share more. He was simply offering a place where she didn't need to pretend. Then, slowly, she said, It's been a long time since I've felt safe enough to talk to someone. Daniel nodded. Sometimes it takes the right moment and the right person. Emily felt a strange warmth rising in her chest at his words. It wasn't romantic, it was human. It felt like being seen without being judged. It felt rare. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the soft rumble of distant thunder. The clouds outside had grown darker and the wind had picked up. The owner stepped out to check the weather and mentioned that a storm was rolling in. Emily looked out through the window. The sky had changed quickly, becoming heavy and moody. The first raindrops tapped gently against the glass. She felt something inside her shift again. Her emotional storm seemed to match the one outside. A small shiver passed through her. She didn't know if it was from the weather or the memories pressing against her heart. She didn't want to think about the things she had been running from. Not tonight, not when she finally felt a moment of calm. Daniel noticed her discomfort. Are you cold? He asked gently. A little, she replied. He gestured toward the warm drink she had barely touched. Take small sips, it helps. She nodded and lifted the cup to her lips. The rain outside grew stronger, tapping faster on the window. The cafe lights flickered once but stayed on. A few customers glanced outside and commented on how sudden the storm was. It made the world outside look darker and lonelier. Daniel turned his attention back to Emily. She didn't know how, but the words that had been trapped inside her since she arrived reached her lips before she could stop them. I don't want to be alone tonight. She didn't say it loudly. She didn't say it dramatically. She simply breathed the words out, soft and honest. Something she needed to say, not because she was helpless, but because she was tired of pretending she was fine. Daniel froze for a split moment, not out of shock, but out of careful thought. He wanted to understand what she meant without misunderstanding her. Her eyes told him everything. She wasn't asking for anything romantic, complicated, or inappropriate. She just needed another human being to stay close so she didn't drown in her emotions. She needed company, understanding, presence, and Daniel respected that deeply. "You won't be," he said gently, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere until you feel okay." Emily felt something inside her finally loosen. It wasn't relief, not fully, but it was something close. It was the feeling of not being abandoned in a moment when her heart felt most fragile. She whispered, "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Daniel replied. "Everyone needs someone sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that." She nodded, looking down at her hands again. The cafe felt warmer than before, not because the temperature changed, but because she finally felt a little less afraid of her own thoughts. The storm outside rumbled louder, shaking the windows slightly, but instead of making her anxious, knowing Daniel was there made the storm feel smaller, almost like background noise. Daniel watched her calmly, waiting for her to breathe fully again. He didn't rush her, he didn't pressure her, he simply stayed, letting her know she wasn't facing the night alone. Emily took one slow breath, then another. And for the first time in days, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. The storm outside grew heavier by the minute. Raindrops slid down the windows in long streams, making it hard to see anything beyond the soft glow of the cafe lights. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance, not harshly, but deep enough to make the world feel smaller and more enclosed. Inside, however, everything felt warm and steady. The cafe's soft music and dim lights created a peaceful atmosphere that wrapped gently around Emily and Daniel as they sat together. Emily's breathing had become steadier. The tension in her shoulders had loosened little by little, as if every minute spent in Daniel's calm presence was helping her let go of the weight she carried. She still felt tired, emotionally drained, but she no longer felt like she was falling apart. The storm around her heart had softened, even if it still lingered. Daniel leaned back in his seat, giving her space while still staying close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. His voice remained soft and relaxed, and his gentle nature filled the quiet moments between them. He didn't look at her with pity. He didn't try to fix her problems. He simply stayed, and somehow, that was the most comforting thing she had experienced in a long time. "You want to know something?" Daniel said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Emily looked up at him, her eyes still a little shiny. "What's that?" "I've learned that some storms aren't meant to be faced alone." She breathed in slowly, letting the words settle inside her. They felt honest and comforting, like a truth she had needed someone to say out loud. Daniel continued, "People think strength means pretending everything is fine, but real strength is knowing when you need a moment to rest." Emily stared at him for a few seconds, then looked down at her hands. "I'm tired of pretending," she admitted quietly. "Then don't pretend tonight," he said gently. "You're safe here." Safe. That word echoed in her mind. It had been so long since she had felt safe, emotionally safe, mentally safe, heart-wise safe. Hearing someone say it so plainly, so sincerely, made her throat tighten again. Daniel noticed, but he didn't make her feel embarrassed. Instead, he shifted the conversation to something lighter, something warm, something that would ease her mind even further. He started sharing stories from his life, little pieces of his past, and the experiences that shaped him. He talked about growing up near the ranch, about the chores he learned from a young age, about the quiet mornings when he'd watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee in hand. Emily listened quietly, letting his stories fill the air. His voice had a steady rhythm, one that soothed her like soft waves brushing the shore. "Most people think ranch life is simple," Daniel said with a small smile. "But it has its challenges, just like anything else. Long days, tough decisions. You learn a lot about patience and responsibility. Emily watched the gentle expression on his face as he spoke. There was something grounding about him, something real. His kindness wasn't loud or forceful. It was steady, consistent, and honest. He told her about the animals he cared for, about the long evenings spent checking fences, about the quiet pride he felt when he saw the ranch thriving. He spoke with warmth, and Emily found herself smiling softly for the first time that evening. "You talk about your life with so much warmth," she said. Daniel shrugged lightly. "Life's not perfect, but there's beauty in the small things. You just have to look for them." Emily nodded slightly. "I haven't been able to see small things lately. Everything feels overwhelming." "That's okay," Daniel said gently. "Sometimes you need a pause before you can see anything clearly." Emily looked out the window. The rain continued to pour steadily, but inside, she felt a quietness she hadn't felt in a long time. After a few minutes, Daniel asked her a question, softly, respectfully, without pressure. "What do you usually do when you need a break from everything?" Emily took a moment to think. The truth was, she didn't give herself breaks often. She had spent so much time being busy, staying distracted, and avoiding her feelings that she rarely paused long enough to breathe. "I usually go for long drives," she said finally. "I don't always have a destination. I just drive until my mind feels quieter." Daniel nodded. "That's not a bad way to clear your head." She met his eyes. "Does it work for you too?" "Sometimes," he said. "Other times I just sit by the fields, watch the sky, listen to the wind. There's a small hill not too far from here. It helps me think." Emily imagined it. A quiet hill overlooking open land, the wind gently brushing through the grass. It sounded peaceful. Daniel continued talking, telling her about the quiet spots he found comfort in. She listened, and with every story, she felt her mind drifting away from her worries and toward something calmer. The storm outside didn't scare her anymore. It became background music to Daniel's steady voice and the warmth of the cafe. "Emily," Daniel said after a while, his tone soft but serious, "you're not alone in how you feel. Everyone goes through moments like this, even if they don't show it." She looked at him with tired eyes. "Do you?" He nodded. "More than you'd think." For a moment, they looked at each other in silence, two strangers who somehow didn't feel like strangers anymore. Two people who understood something deep and human without needing a lot of words. Emily leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "I'm glad you're here." Daniel gave her a small smile. "I'm glad you're here too." Another soft rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. The cafe owner switched on a few more lights, making the room brighter. The warm glow reflected off the table, creating a cozy circle of light around them. Emily felt her heart steadying. The ache was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. She wasn't drowning in it anymore. She was breathing, slowly but surely. Daniel watched her carefully, not with worry, but with the gentle attentiveness of someone who wanted to make sure she felt supported. "Do you want to stay here for a while longer?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, I like being here." "Then we'll stay," he said, as if it was the simplest decision in the world. And somehow, with him, it was. Time passed without them noticing. The storm kept pouring outside, but inside, they talked about everything and nothing. It wasn't forced, wasn't awkward. The conversation flowed easily, like two people sitting by a fire on a cold night, warming each other with shared words. Emily started to relax more visibly. She laughed softly at one of Daniel's stories. She took another sip of her warm drink. Her shoulders loosened even further, and her eyes became brighter, not from tears but from the comfort of the moment. Daniel felt a quiet sense of responsibility, not pressure, but a natural instinct to be a steady presence. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't trying to impress her. He just wanted to help her feel less burdened. As the night went on, Emily realized something important. She hadn't known Daniel for long. They were still strangers in many ways. Yet in this small cafe, on this stormy night, he had become the one person her heart felt safe with, and that simple truth mattered more than anything else. The storm finally began to soften after what felt like hours. The thunder grew quieter, the rain lightened, and the windows no longer shook from the wind. The cafe still glowed warmly, but the atmosphere inside felt even calmer now, almost peaceful. Emily hadn't realized how much time had passed. With Daniel sitting across from her, time had stopped feeling heavy and slow. Instead, it flowed gently, like a soft river moving past smooth stones. Emily looked out the window, watching the raindrops slowly shrink. The world outside seemed washed clean, as if the storm had taken some of its weight with it. She felt lighter, too, not healed, not suddenly fine, but comforted, grounded. The storm in her heart wasn't gone, but it no longer felt impossible to face. Daniel followed her gaze. "Looks like the rain is tired," he said lightly, giving her a small smile. "Yeah," Emily whispered, her voice soft but steady. "It's finally calming down." The owner of the cafe walked over to check on them. He wasn't nosy. He simply asked if they needed anything else. Emily shook her head politely. She felt grateful for the quiet corner she had found here, for the warmth of the room, and for Daniel's presence. When the owner walked away again, Daniel stood up slowly. "If you're feeling up to it," he said, "there's a place I'd like to show you. It helps me whenever I feel overwhelmed." Emily looked at him with a hint of curiosity. "Where?" "It's not far," Daniel said gently. "A small hill outside town. It's peaceful. No noise, no crowds, just open sky." "I thought maybe you'd like some quiet, fresh air after being cooped up in here." Emily hesitated, not because she didn't trust him, but because it was still strange to think she was accepting comfort from someone she had only just met. But the truth was, Daniel hadn't made her feel unsafe even once. Every moment with him had been gentle, respectful, and reassuring. She sensed no pressure from him, only kindness. She took a breath. "Okay, I'd like that." Daniel nodded softly, as if he had expected her answer but didn't want to assume. He grabbed his hat, shaking off some dust that had settled on it earlier. Emily stood up, and for a moment, she realized her legs felt steadier than before. She wasn't trembling anymore. They walked out of the cafe together. The cool night air greeted them, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and rain-soaked grass. The street glistened under the dim streetlights, reflecting soft puddles that shimmered gently with the movement of the wind. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was scared, but because the chill in the air touched her lightly. Daniel noticed and gestured toward his truck parked nearby. "It's a short drive," he said. "The hill is just outside town." Emily nodded, and they walked toward the truck. Daniel opened the passenger door for her, not out of formality, but out of quiet courtesy. She climbed in, settling into the comfortable seat. The interior smelled faintly of leather and pine, something pleasant and naturally refreshing. Daniel walked around to the driver's side and got in. As they began driving, the world outside the windows turned into soft shadows and subtle lights. The air was fresh after the rain, and the sky, though still cloudy, had started to open in patches. A few stars peeked through, shining softly like tiny sparks, spreading courage across the night. The drive wasn't long. Emily didn't speak much, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, like both of them were taking a deep breath together. Daniel drove steadily, occasionally glancing over to make sure she was okay. She was. Maybe for the first time in days, She felt truly okay. When they reached the base of the hill, Daniel parked the truck on a flat, grassy area. The ground was still damp from the storm, but the air felt warmer now. The smell of wet soil filled the space, mixed with the cool scent of fresh night breeze. "This way," Daniel said softly. They walked up the small hill together. It wasn't steep, and the ground was firm enough to step on without slipping. As they climbed higher, the view behind them stretched out. Distant lights from the small town, soft and warm, flickered like quiet stars resting on the earth. When they reached the top, Emily stopped. The view before her was vast and breathtaking. The land stretched out in gentle waves, the fields glistening faintly under the moonlight that had begun to peek through the thinning clouds. The sky above them was opening slowly, revealing more stars as the storm drifted away. Everything around them felt calm, open, free. "This is beautiful," she breathed, almost in awe. Daniel smiled softly. "I come here whenever my mind feels too full. It helps me breathe again." Emily stepped forward, letting the wind brush her hair and cool her face. She didn't say anything for a long moment. She simply stood there, taking in the beauty, feeling the world open around her. For the first time in days, her thoughts didn't feel like they were pressing down on her. Instead, they felt lighter, drifting like clouds in the sky. Daniel stood beside her, giving her space to feel it all. He looked at her quietly, without saying anything unnecessary. He knew she needed the moment, to think, to release, to settle. After a while, Emily spoke. "I didn't realize how much I needed this. Sometimes a quiet place can carry us when our hearts feel too heavy," Daniel said. Emily glanced at him. "How did you find this place?" Daniel chuckled softly. "By accident, actually. Years ago, I was having a rough day. I just started walking. Ended up here. The view made me feel small in a good way. It reminded me that life is bigger than the problems I carried." Emily let his words sink in. She felt the truth in them. Standing here, looking at the wide night sky and endless land, her own troubles didn't feel as crushing. They were still real, still painful, but they didn't consume all of her anymore. She took a slow breath. "Thank you for bringing me here." Daniel nodded. "I thought maybe it would help." "It does," she said softly. "More than you know." They watched the sky together, letting the silence speak for them. The stars continued to appear, one by one, scattered across the dark canvas above them. The moon slipped through the clouds more boldly, casting silver light across the fields. Emily felt the cool wind wrap around her like a gentle hug. She wasn't alone. She wasn't lost. She wasn't drowning anymore. She was standing on a hill in a quiet town beside a stranger who didn't feel like a stranger, finding a moment of peace she thought she would never feel again. Daniel stayed close, but not too close. He didn't crowd her space or try to make the moment anything more than what it was. He simply stood as a steady presence, a reminder that kindness still existed quietly in the world. After a long time, Emily finally spoke again. "I think I forgot how to breathe." Daniel turned his head toward her. "Then tonight can be your reminder." She smiled, softly, gently, but sincerely. And for the first time, her smile reached her eyes. They stayed there until the sky opened completely, until the storm was nothing but a fading memory, until Emily felt ready to step forward again, even if just a little. And when they walked back down the hill together, the night felt lighter, warmer, safer. Emily knew she wasn't healed. Healing takes time, but she was no longer overwhelmed, no longer trembling, no longer holding everything inside alone. She had found a moment of calm in the middle of her storm, and that, she realized, was more than enough for tonight. When morning light slowly touched the sky, Emily opened her eyes with a softness she had not felt in a long time. She was still sitting in her car, parked near the quiet hill Daniel had shown her the night before. Her head rested lightly on the seat, and for the first time in days, her breathing felt calm and steady. She looked at the peaceful sky and felt as if something inside her had finally stopped shaking. Daniel's truck was still parked a short distance away. He had stayed nearby just in case she needed anything during the night, but he had kept a respectful distance, giving her the space to rest. Emily stepped out of her car, stretching her arms gently. The cool morning breeze brushed against her skin, carrying the smell of fresh earth and wild grass. It was a simple moment, but it gave her a warm feeling inside. Daniel stepped out of his truck, giving her a kind smile. "Morning," he said softly. Emily smiled back, and even she was surprised by how natural it felt. "Good morning," she replied. "I think I slept without crying for the first time this week." "That's good," Daniel said. "Sometimes a quiet night in a safe place helps more than anything else." Emily nodded. She took a slow breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. "Thank you," she said, "for yesterday. For everything." Daniel shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would help if they saw someone hurting." Emily looked at him with soft eyes. "Not everyone would. But you did." There was a tender silence between them. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a moment where words weren't necessary because both of them understood each other perfectly. After a moment, Daniel walked a little closer, stopping near the front of her car. "Are you feeling okay to drive now?" he asked. "Yes," she said with quiet confidence. "I think I'm finally ready." They both stood on the hill, looking out at the large fields that stretched far into the distance. The sun was rising, and the golden light made the world look warm and full of hope. Emily felt as though she was watching her life begin again, not in a dramatic way, but in a soft, peaceful way, like a door gently opening. She touched her chest lightly. "You know," she said, "last night I felt like everything inside me was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to breathe without feeling pain." Daniel listened quietly, not interrupting. "But then you sat with me," she continued. "You talked with me. You didn't try to fix everything or tell me I was wrong for feeling the way I did. You just stayed. And that meant everything to me." Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment, touched by her words. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "all a person needs is someone who doesn't walk away." Emily smiled softly at that, and Daniel waited until she was ready to speak again. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "I still have things I need to face. I still have a lot of healing to do." Daniel nodded. "Healing takes time, and it's okay if it feels slow." Emily looked at him with deep gratitude. "I felt lost, but now I feel like I can try again. You helped me find a little bit of hope." Daniel placed his hands in his pockets, giving a humble shrug. "Hope comes from inside you. I just reminded you it's still there." They stood together as the sunlight grew brighter. Emily felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. The fear she carried, the loneliness she felt, the tears that kept coming, suddenly they didn't seem as heavy. She now had a moment to breathe, to think, to feel calm. After a while, Emily walked toward her car, opening the door slowly. She placed her bag on the seat, then turned around to look at Daniel one last time before leaving. "Will we stay in touch?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded right away. "Of course," he said. "You're not alone anymore. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone to listen, you can call me." Emily felt something warm in her chest. She took out her phone and handed it to him. Daniel typed in his number, then handed the phone back to her. "If you ever visit this town again," he said with a small smile, "you know where to find me." Emily returned the smile. "I will," she said. "And thank you again, Daniel. You saved me from a night that felt too heavy to handle." Daniel looked at her with gentle eyes. You saved yourself. I was just there. Emily didn't argue. She simply held his kind gaze for a moment. The connection between them felt soft, yet strong, like a quiet understanding that would stay with her even after she drove away. She got inside the car and started the engine. The familiar sound felt different this morning, almost comforting. Daniel stepped back, giving her space to pull out. As she rolled down the window, he lifted a hand in a simple goodbye. Take care, Emily, he said. I will, she replied. She slowly drove down the hill, the tires moving over the gravel path. Daniel watched her go, not with sadness, but with calm assurance. He knew she was leaving stronger than before. She was leaving with hope. As Emily reached the main road, she looked at the hill through her mirror one last time. Daniel's figure grew smaller and smaller until she could no longer see him. But strangely, she didn't feel alone. Something in her heart felt lighter, as if a piece of peace was traveling with her. The road ahead was long, but it didn't frighten her anymore. She had faced a difficult night, but she was still standing. She had met someone who saw her pain and didn't turn away. Someone who showed her kindness without expecting anything. Someone who reminded her that she mattered, even when she had forgotten. While she drove, she thought about all the moments of the previous night. The cafe, the storm, the hill, the stars, the quiet warmth of Daniel's presence. These memories felt like gentle lights inside her, guiding her forward. She whispered softly to herself, I'm going to be okay. She believed it this time. When she finally stopped at a gas station later that morning, she looked at her reflection in the car window. Her eyes were still a little tired, but they no longer looked lost. They looked steady. They looked ready. She took out her phone and saw Daniel's number saved in her contacts. She smiled. She didn't need to call him right now, but knowing he was there, just one message away, was enough. Emily got back on the road, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Life had brought her to a stranger who became a moment of peace. A moment that changed everything. Sometimes hope didn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it came from a quiet cowboy on a quiet night. Sometimes it came from kindness you never expected. And sometimes it came simply because life gave you one more chance to breathe. Emily drove forward with a heart that felt new, ready for the next chapter of her life. And even though she was alone in her car, she didn't feel alone at all. Not anymore.